Roqoo Depot presents our interview with author John Jackson Miller covering his new book, Star Wars: A New Dawn. Alright, John, starting things off, did you run into any challenges when writing A New Dawn?
For this book, I was going to be consulting with the Lucasfilm Story Group, Dave Filoni and the other executive producers, and also the people that are, on the story group in charge of coordinating everything and keeping track of what's going on in all the different parts of the Star Wars universe. The challenge really was simply in the very beginning, finding out what was going to be happening in the Rebels series, what was going to be happening in the earlier period where I decided I was going to set my prequel, and how the characters were going to interact in that time. The only two characters that are in Rebels and A New Dawn are Kanan and Hera, and they gave me the chance to write their first meeting. I thought that was terrific. But that also meant that I needed to come up with a big moment that they were, that they felt was worthy of their meeting. And so, it was a little bit more complicated than the usual process. But I think in the end, it worked out for everybody.
Well, that's pretty interesting that they let you canonize their meeting. Yeah,
and of course the thing is, I'm doing this before any of the episodes of Rebels have been, certainly they haven't been released. But all I knew about the TV show was, descriptions of the first season's episodes. So I didn't really know for sure what the personalities of the characters were, what the right dialogue should be for them. And that's again where they came in handy. They gave me some guidance up, beforehand, and then, of course they got to also take a look at the book when it was done.
Well, that kind of leads into the second question, was how much direction did you actually get for the characters of Kanan and Hera?
Well, again, the trick was that at this time in the Star Wars universe, there is no real rebellion. And while Hera is interested in, starting a rebellion, she also knows that it's far too early to begin recruiting for it. Nothing really useful is going to happen. And they told me that was going to be the case, and that furthermore, did find Kanan, that she would not immediately think that he was going to be rebel material. At the same time, they let me know, what he should be thinking at this point in time and how his response to her should be. And so I think it should come across pretty well in the novel that, this was not an intentional pairing of these two characters. The fact that they end up on an adventure together was not something that was ever in the plans for either one of them.
Now, moving away from Kanan and Hera, one of the main villains in the book is Count Vidian. He's described as a vindictive businessman turned cyborg who's in the Emperor's favor. You even gave him a pretty unique description of his clothing, from wearing like a red tunic and a kilt. I was wondering, where did the idea for Count Vidian come from?
Well, the idea for Count Vidian is in part, we had at the end of episode 3, this big change of the rebellion to the Empire. It struck me that the Emperor would have been working to create allies in the Old Republic. And, he would have had his political supporters in the Old Republic. And many of these people would have wanted to get jobs in the Empire, or he would have given jobs in the Empire. And the figure of Vidian, he really represents somebody who was a mover and shaker in the very late rebellion period, who saw that Palpatine was going to continue to be a powerful figure. And, he's entirely in favor of the idea of turning the Republic into an empire. He's entirely in favor of developing this big, enormous fleet of Star Destroyers, and he is offered his services to the Emperor in that regard. Vidian is a guy who is one of these, corporate turnaround artists. He goes in and fixes industries that are broken, companies that are broken, and the Emperor sets him to work going to all these planets that produce strategic materials for the Imperial fleet, and sends him out to shake them up and get them producing more, because they're going to have to build a whole lot of spaceships in the future.
Well, cool. Did you have a voice that you imagined for Vidian?
Yeah, Vidian, it's fun. He is a character who, yeah, everything about him is artificial. That's what one person says of him. And one of the things that he was famous for in the Republic period is, he recorded all of his management seminars and things like that, and became sort of one of these corporate gurus that you might see on CNBC. And what he did was, since his voice is artificial, it is generated because the illness that he had resulted in the destruction of his vocal cords. He has a voice that is computer generated by his onboard systems, but he market tested the voice. He had a focus group work on what would be the most effective voice for him. Of course, it also still has sort of a bit of an artificial sound to it, but he wanted to sound motivational. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what he sounds like when we get the audiobook.
Yeah. Now, about the headlines in the book, what inspired you to do that?
Well, I did. These sort of holo news headlines as released by the Empire, and actually specific to the planet Gorse, where we're setting our book. Obviously those initially started way back. I think some of the stuff that West End published, probably the Star Wars Adventure Journal, I think is where those first came from. And I did them myself in the Knights of the Old Republic. In the second year of that series, I did a bunch of different, sort of holo feeds, including the Republic reporting on how everything was great on the planet that was being invaded by the Mandalorians. So I got to enjoy writing propaganda headlines for these guys, sort of the Baghdad Bob of the planet Terrace.
Right.
Was reporting, and it struck me that what I wanted to do, since I had these 4 different sections of the book, I wanted to have the Imperial propaganda machine sort of sitting back there acting like a Greek chorus, commenting sometimes ironically about what's going on. And of course, if you read these headlines, they do have a bit of black humor to them. When a planet is in danger, they say that looks like it's going to be a busy tourism season ahead.
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, I like how they added a larger sense of the picture of what was going on. It gave you a sense of how everybody else was viewing the events.
That's right. And they should also have communicated how little people outside of this system were ever going to find out about what happened. That is one of the issues of the book, is how can a rebellion really take shape in this time, in this day and age, when the control over the media is so complete. Nobody knows right now, at this point anyway, nobody knows whether the misery that they're living through is common to the whole galaxy or not. I think pretty much everybody on Gorse assumes, well, life on Gorse was never great, and this isn't much better, but it's nothing to revolt over.
Now, throughout the story, Hera hints at being on a mission, but she never says if she's on a mission for someone else or another group. It's either she's independent agent looking for potential allies and information for the possibility of a rebellion, but it's never really made clear if she's really just doing everything on her own or whether she is working with other people. Is that something you can clarify?
That feels to me like a story which is large enough that the television series is more likely to address it.
Okay.
I was given the chance to tell a portion of Kanan's origin story, but we didn't delve too deeply into Hera's past. And I think that's right that we leave something for the people that are developing these characters.
In addition to Kanan and Hera, you introduced Clone Wars veteran named Skelly, and I was kind of curious more about him. Was he an ex-clone trooper or just like a regular human fighting for the Republic?
Yeah, he wasn't a clone. I think that's I think that's said in there somewhere. Or it should be. He's definitely just a one of what I imagined would have existed. One of the many recruits that would have been out there in various militias fighting alongside the clones against the separatists. And it struck me that, a whole lot of people after any war look at it and say, was this thing really necessary? And you also end up getting conspiracy theorists about wars. Doesn't matter what war it is, the Spanish-American War, World War II, Vietnam War. We've seen all of these where people have, after the fact, questioned some of the, ideas about going into the war and what it was really all about. Well, obviously, the Clone Wars are pretty fishy, and it doesn't take a lot of paranoia for somebody to build a really good conspiracy theory about the Clone Wars. The problem is it's possible to build a lot of different conspiracy theories, none of which actually, make sense or agree with each other. And Skelly has all of the theories. He's one of these guys who's, he's right about a few very big things and he's wrong about so many others. And because he's wrong about so many others and he's so completely obnoxious, no one's ever going to listen to him. And that's part of the tragedy of this book is that there are people who are left over, damaged goods from this previous war who may have been able to make a contribution, but they're just in such a bad place, in part because of the Empire, but also in part because the Republic. I try to convey that the Republic was no great shakes either. That they had their own problems too. This place was ripe for this thing to happen. This empire to rise. If somebody just pushed it hard enough. So yeah, Skelly is a lot of fun, and he's the one character besides Kanan who was in the very earliest draft of the book, or the very earliest plot line that I came up with, because I did want to deal with this kind of character.
Well, it's also kind of nice to see that carry over from one era to another, which historically you haven't seen a lot in Star Wars because they didn't have the background information to do it.
Yeah, and this time frame had been closed. I mean, we just weren't able to do anything here. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that this was one of our first toes in the water in this part of the timeline. And if I take a little extra time to develop that, it really is because we just haven't seen it. Right.
I was just kind of wondering, more of a general question is, I assume like most writers, you get stuck. What do you do when you get stuck when you're writing? Do you have anything?
It doesn't happen a lot, but often I will skip ahead. I've been learning to write the end of books earlier and earlier. Write the final chapters earlier and earlier in the process, and maybe some of the other important scenes in the middle, so that I can have a better idea of what I'm moving toward. And then sometimes when you get to that material, you have to make a few tweaks to adapt to where you change things.
Right.
But otherwise, yeah. I mean, I think the best thing that I've started doing is, in the very beginning I skipped around a whole lot, and that was too much. Now I'm more straightforward, but it really is a good idea to write the ending fairly, not early in the process, but well before you get to the end, because by the time you get to the end, you're exhausted, and you want to have that heartfelt moment a lot earlier. I think if my first novel was Knight Errant, and the very last chapter, the epilogue of it was written fairly early, and I feel a lot better about that chapter than the chapter immediately before it, which I feel I was really just trying to get through because I was so tired. Because that was the last chapter of the book.
What can readers look forward to next?
I've got other projects in the hopper. The book that I have that is coming out in January is the full-length Star Trek novel that I wrote.
I'm looking forward to that one because I really enjoyed the novel that you wrote.
Oh yeah, the novella. Oh yeah, this is better. This is that was like a single episode of the TV series. This is more like a movie. It's called Star Trek: The Next Generation Takedown, and it pits Riker and Picard against each other.
Huh.
Of course, we saw them square off in the whole Borg storyline, way back when. This is a bit different. Now Picard is he's no longer the superior officer because Riker has been promoted. He's an admiral, and I've concocted a situation where they're on two different ships and they're at cross purposes. And of course, even though they're friends, there's something that's got to be settled here, because they both want different things in a certain situation. So it's a fun story, and it really does, appeal to what I wanted to do, which was to tell a really sort of, a roaring space naval yarn. We don't, in that story, they don't set foot on a planet the entire book. And I think that is a lot of fun. It's all in space.
When's that due out?
That's January 27th, and that's from Simon & Schuster, and that's a mass market paperback. Simon & Schuster Pocket Books is the official publisher, so I'm looking forward to that. And then sometime here this fall, there's a anthology coming out called Apollo's Daughters, and that's from Silence in the Library Publishing. This is the consequence of a Kickstarter campaign that was earlier in the year. This has a number of stories. Mike Stackpole's got something in it. A lot of other science fiction writers have stories in it. And the lead story in it, I have found out, is the story I submitted, which is another Overdraft story. Overdraft being the serial storyline that I did last year in my own universe. And this is a fun story. It's the origin story, or one of the first space adventures of the heroine from the Overdraft series.
Oh, that's cool. I enjoyed
Cool.
the Overdraft series.
Yeah.
This is Bridget Yang's. Well, it's not her first mission, but it's a very early mission, and it explains how she ends up with the company that she's with.
So, John, have you talked to Marvel, or have they talked to you about?
We all saw what Marvel released today, and that's the first I knew about what they were doing specifically there. It's a shame that change had to happen, but you knew kind of it was going to.
Well, you know what? From both of us, congratulations on getting the first canon Star Wars book, new canon. I know we were pretty excited when we heard that you were writing the first canon book. So.
I was surprised myself because I was in the middle of writing it.
I just wish they had canonized Kenobi.
Until they do anything saying that, he definitely did not, do this. It's fine, until they ever, as long as they don't, and look, if they were to do something like that, put out an Ewan McGregor movie or something like that, set in that time frame that does overwrite that book, well, then who cares anyway? Because I wouldn't want my book to prevent them from doing a movie like that.
Oh, me either, but I...
again, I actually have a blog post coming up on StarWars.com where, I've kept mum on canon and everything like this until this, and I will get a bit into, how honestly this just does not seem to me to be that big a deal to me personally, because I'm old enough that I've seen things come in and go out, and the Marvel stuff was out, and then the Marvel stuff we brought it back in, and now nothing's in, and it's these things are these things change, and it's up to us as readers to decide what matters.
Right, and it doesn't mean you can't enjoy the books. I mean, the books are there; they were written.
Yeah, exactly. So so there we go. And so anyway, that's we'll see how it goes. But anyway, that ought to do it.
All righty, Stephen.
Well, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to do the interview with us.
All right.
And I look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Yeah, well, me too.
We want to thank author John Jackson Miller for taking the time to answer our questions. and we want to address all readers to check out his new book, Star Wars: A New Dawn, available in hardcover, audio, and digital formats. Remember to check out RoqooDepot.com for more interviews, book reviews, and Star Wars coverage. Thank you for listening.